Hey, wide awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories.
I should have paid attention to the curtains the second I walked in. That's what messes with me the most. It wasn't the mismatched furniture, or the weird smell of cheap candles, or even the fact that she looked like a slightly edited version of her photos. It was the curtains. Every single one of them shut tight. Not just pulled closed, but pinned, clipped, taped at the edges like she didn't want a millimeter of light getting through. She said she liked cozy vibes. I believed her. That was mistake number one. We matched a week before, and she seemed way more normal than most girls on the app. Funny, quick responses, good energy, always asking about my day. She said she preferred staying in to going out, and she talked a lot about wanting a peaceful night instead of loud dates. She invited me over because she said she made nachos and wanted to watch a film with someone real. That should have already been weird. No one invites strangers to their flat that fast, but she sounded excited, and honestly, I didn't see the harm. When I got to her building, she buzzed me in instantly. Another red flag I ignored. The hallway looked normal enough. Her door wasn't locked with 10 bolts or anything weird. But the second she opened it, everything felt off. It was too dark, too quiet, too staged. She smiled and told me to come in like she practiced the line in the mirror. Then she closed the door behind me faster than I expected. I looked around trying to adjust my eyes. Every window was covered. Living room, kitchen, hallway, blackout curtains with no gaps anywhere. The only light came from 2 warm lamps, placed almost perfectly to light up the sofa area. It looked too neat, too positioned, like a set. I tried to shrug it off. I asked why the curtains were shut, and she said the neighbors were nosy and she liked her privacy. The way she said it felt rehearsed, like it was her automatic answer if anyone asked. She offered me nachos, but they were barely touched, like she made them just for the photo she sent me earlier and didn't actually care about eating. We sat on the sofa and she kept glancing at the corner of the room. Not the TV, not me, the corner like she was checking something. I followed her eyes and didn't see anything, but the feeling in my chest started tightening. Then she did something weird. She asked if she could take a photo of us. Not a selfie. A photo from across the room. I laughed it off and asked why. She shrugged and said she wanted memories, but I had already heard that excuse before, and something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. She positioned her phone on a shelf facing the sofa and hit record before pretending it was a timer. Not a photo. A video. She sat back down next to me, way too close, smiling directly at the phone for a second before turning her attention back to me like nothing happened. That was when I started to panic internally. I forced myself to act casual while my brain kept screaming that something was wrong. I pretended to check something in my bag just so I could move slightly and see the phone's screen reflection in a mirror. She wasn't recording us casually. She had an entire chat window open, with hundreds of little hearts and comments floating on the screen. She was live streaming. Us. Our date. Me without knowing. I didn't understand at first. I blinked like maybe I read it wrong, but then I saw a message pop up. He looks confused, lol. Tell him to smile. Make him talk more. My whole body went cold. I stood up slowly and told her I needed to use the bathroom. She nodded too quickly and didn't even try to stop me. That's what scared me more. She didn't care if I walked around her flat. She didn't care if I saw things. Because she already had everything she needed on camera. But she kept glancing toward the curtains. That's when I heard them. Voices outside. Muffled at first. Then louder. Then closer. Walkie-talkies clicking. Boots hitting pavement. A flashlight beam moving across a window. I thought maybe it was neighbors, or maybe I imagined it, but then the lights outside shifted again, sweeping low, slow, like searching. I stepped back from the bathroom door and mouthed to her that someone was outside. She froze. Full body freeze. Not scared. Guilty. Then, boom! The door didn't knock. It exploded open. Police rushed in wearing heavy gear, shouting orders, pointing torches at every corner of the room. I put my hands up instantly because I had no idea what was happening. Half of them grabbed her. Half of them grabbed her phone. One officer covered the camera lens like it was already evidence. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She didn't even act shocked. She just sighed like she'd been expecting eventually to get caught. An officer pulled me aside, sat me near the hallway, and explained everything in the calmest voice ever, like this wasn't insane. My date wasn't a normal girl. She was part of a live streaming network that hosted illegal romantic date shows, where viewers paid money to watch people on dates without their consent. She lured men from dating apps, brought them to her flat, filmed everything, uploaded it in real time to paying viewers. Comment sections, bets, requests, reactions, all happening in secret. She kept curtains shut because the location couldn't be leaked. She staged the lighting to make the stream look clean. She rehearsed her lines to keep the audience entertained. The nachos weren't for me. They were props. The sofa position wasn't random. It was framed for the camera. And the viewers weren't there for romance. They were there for the moment the guy realized something was wrong. They liked the fear, the confusion, the moment the date turned uncomfortable. I unknowingly walked straight into their favorite part. One officer said they'd been tracking her account for weeks, trying to catch her in the middle of a live stream so they had real-time proof. Tonight was the night. They used the IP location, waited until more viewers joined, and stormed the building once they confirmed she lured another victim. That victim was me. When they escorted me outside, I saw neighbors staring, officers carrying equipment, and 3 more people from different flats being questioned. She didn't just catfish. She turned dates into entertainment, into income, into a show for strangers who liked watching people get tricked. I walked home shaken, thinking about every second I sat on that sofa. How many people watched me? How many commented on me? How many laughed at my reactions? I wasn't on a date. I was on camera. And she didn't need my consent. She just needed me to sit down. The whole reason I even matched him was because his profile looked so normal. Not normal in a boring way, but normal in that harmless gym guy vibe. Every picture was him in different gym mirrors, different outfits, different angles. He looked strong, clean, confident. The kind of guy who wakes up early, eats protein oats, posts motivational quotes, all that. Nothing scary. Nothing weird. Just a guy who liked benches and dumbbells too much. His messages weren't anything special either. Short, simple, not flirty. He asked where I liked to eat, what time worked for me, and if I wanted to meet at a small cafe that wasn't too busy. I said yeah, because honestly I didn't expect anything dramatic. I thought worst case scenario, he talked too much about pre-workout powder or brag about reps. I wish that was what happened. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted him right away, sitting at a corner table. But something felt wrong instantly. He didn't look like the guy in the gym selfies. The shape was vaguely similar, but the person wasn't the same. His face looked older. His eyes looked sunken. His hair was shorter, uneven, almost like he cut it himself in a rush. And the biggest difference, he wasn't muscular at all. Not even slightly. His photos showed a guy who lifted heavy. The man in front of me looked thin, almost weak, wearing a hoodie that swallowed him. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He didn't stand up. He didn't wave. He just stared. I should have walked away right then. I awkwardly sat across from him, trying to pretend I wasn't already planning my exit. I said hi. He didn't say it back. He just nodded once like he was forcing the movement. I asked how his day was. He nodded. I asked if he wanted a drink. He nodded. I tried asking about the gym photos. He nodded. Every answer was the same, just nodding. No words, not even a sound. I thought maybe he was shy or didn't like talking, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like he couldn't talk, or wasn't allowed to, or didn't want to open his mouth because he didn't want his voice to give something away. His hands were shaking too. Not a little bit. Proper shaking. Like he was freezing or nervous or both. He kept pulling his sleeves over his hands and tucking them inside the hoodie like he didn't want anyone to see them. I made up a quick excuse, something about needing to meet a friend. I didn't even finish the sentence before he suddenly lifted his head fully and stared at me so hard it felt like my lungs locked. Not angry, not sad. More like he was calculating. He slowly dragged his chair back, like he was about to stand up and block me if I tried to leave. I stood anyway. He didn't touch me, but he watched my every move, every step, every breath. The second I stepped outside the cafe, I felt like I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I walked quickly down the street, not running, but fast enough that anyone watching would know I wanted to get away. I reached the end of the pavement and stopped for 1 second to text my friend. I told her the date was bad, that he was weird, that something was wrong with him. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. I read that message maybe 3 minutes before everything changed. I heard shouting. Actual shouting. Not inside voices, but full police voices. Then I heard boots hitting the pavement. Multiple. Fast. I turned around thinking maybe something random happened inside the cafe, like a fight or a robbery. Something that had nothing to do with me. But when I turned, I froze. The whole area around the cafe was surrounded. Armed police. Not just regular officers. Not just two. Dozens. Vests. Helmets. Guns. Shields. People on the street backed away quickly. Some filmed. Some ran. Some just stood there confused. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. One officer shouted through a speaker for someone inside the cafe to stand up slowly and raise their hands. My chest tightened so hard it felt like it cracked. There was only one person who could have triggered that kind of response. The man I had just been sitting with. The cafe door burst open and officers stormed inside. People screamed. Someone dropped a tray. Chairs slammed. There was a crash like glass hitting the floor. After what felt like forever, they dragged him out. Handcuffed. Head down. Put half off. No nodding now. No shaking. Just this cold, empty expression like he'd been expecting this moment. An officer noticed me standing frozen on the pavement. He walked over and asked if I had been with the man earlier. My voice barely came out, but I said yes. He asked if I was okay. Then he looked at me in that way officers look when they're trying to decide how much truth someone can handle. He said the man was a fugitive. He'd been hiding for months using different dating apps. Different photos. Different stolen gym selfies. Different profiles every week. They said he never used his real voice on dates. He never talked because multiple victims from earlier crimes described his voice clearly. If he spoke, he'd be recognized instantly. If he spoke, everything would be over. They said he rotated flats, squatted in abandoned places, used gym locker rooms to take fake selfies, and met women only in public so he wouldn't be tracked to a home. He wasn't looking for relationships. He wasn't looking for hookups. He wasn't even looking for company. He was hiding, and I was his ally. If anyone saw him somewhere, he could claim he was on a date the whole time. If anyone asked where he'd been, he could say he was meeting a friend. If the police tracked app activity, it'd see normal dating patterns. Nothing suspicious. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that screamed fugitive. I walked home shaking so hard my teeth hurt. Every step felt like it echoed inside my chest. Because I kept thinking about the way he watched me. The way he tried to stand when I did. The way he nodded instead of speaking. The way his eyes never left my face, not once. If I had stayed even 5 more minutes, I would have been inside the cafe when the officers stormed in with guns raised. If I had agreed to walk somewhere quieter, I don't know if he would have let me go at all. He didn't meet me because he liked me. He met me because he needed a hiding place inside a public moment. I swear the intro to this whole thing still feels like one of those moments where your brain whispers something's off, but you keep going anyway because you don't want to look dramatic. I matched with this girl on a dating app one random night. Her profile looked normal. Cute pictures. Simple captions. Nothing weird. Her vibe online felt chill, and she didn't talk like she was trying too hard. She suggested meeting in a park near my area because she said she loved calm places. I didn't think twice. That was mistake number 1. The minute I reached the park and saw her waving, my stomach dropped so fast it felt like I tripped internally. She didn't look slightly different. She looked completely different. Different hair, different height, different face structure. It was like meeting a whole new person who borrowed the personality of the girl in the photos, but forgot to borrow her looks too. But she waved like she read my last message 5 minutes ago and seemed excited, so I didn't know how to back out without causing a scene. I told myself maybe she used old photos, or maybe filters made the pictures unrealistic. People do that all the time. She walked fast, way faster than someone who wanted to get to know you. She kept glancing over her shoulder every few seconds like she was checking something. Or someone. She asked me to put my phone in my jacket pocket because she wanted to see my eyes when I talked. It sounded cute for half a second, but the second she said it, she stared at the exact pocket where I put my phone like she already planned something. The whole situation felt stiff. She kept drifting closer to my side, almost brushing against me. At first I thought she was just awkward with personal space. But every time she bumped my arm, her hand would slightly brush against my pocket. That's when I started to feel it. That quiet, creeping tension that rises slow, but doesn't leave. I tried to switch pockets. She noticed instantly. Her eyes flicked down like she was mentally tracking the phone like prey. We walked deeper into the park, and she suddenly said she wanted to show me a spot she liked. She pointed at a pathway with barely any people. My chest tightened. I pretended I needed to tie my shoes just so I could step back a little and look around. 2 guys were sitting on a bench nearby. One pretended to be on a call. One was tying his laces for way too long. Both kept glancing at us, but not in a curious way, in a watching way, waiting. She kept walking a few steps ahead, acting annoyed that I slowed down. She told me to hurry because she didn't like wasting time. That's when it clicked that I wasn't dealing with someone awkward. I was dealing with someone on a plan. I mumbled something about needing to head home soon. She turned around so fast it startled me. She forced a tiny smile and said we hadn't even bonded yet. Her tone wasn't flirty anymore. It had this pressure behind it, like she needed me to keep walking. The 2 guys from the bench suddenly stood up at the same time. That's when my heart went straight into panic mode. I didn't want to run because I didn't know if they'd chase me. I didn't want to confront her because she looked way too calm for someone who got caught lying. So I played dumb. I said I needed water from the cafe near the gate and started walking toward the exit. She followed immediately, still hovering too close to me. Right when she tried to move behind me, everything exploded at once. 2 men jumped out from behind a hedge near the main path. But they weren't the guys from the bench. These 2 moved fast, precise, and with purpose. One grabbed her wrist. The other blocked the path between her and my pocket like he already knew what she was aiming for. She screamed, but not like someone innocent. She screamed like someone caught in the middle of something she didn't want to explain. The guys flashed badges. Undercover officers. My whole body dropped in relief so heavy my knees nearly went. I stepped back and they told me to stay behind the bench. The girl kept shouting my name, telling me not to believe them, telling me they were mixing her up with someone else. But the officers didn't listen to a single word she said. One of them pulled out a radio and said they had her. The other started handcuffing her while she tried to twist out of their grip. Then the officer nearest to me finally explained what was going on. They had been watching her for weeks. She wasn't just using dating apps for attention. She was part of a pickpocketing ring that targeted men by pretending to flirt with them. She'd meet them in quiet areas, walk close enough to brush their pockets, signal to her partners, and steal phones, wallets, anything valuable. Sometimes the victims didn't notice for hours. Sometimes they noticed too late and she'd vanish into the park where her crew waited. Those guys I saw on the bench. Not officers. Her partners. Waiting for her signal. And the part that made my chest tighten the most. The officers said she had already attempted 2 thefts earlier that same day. Both men realized too late and reported descriptions that matched exactly what she looked like in person. Not her app photos. Her real face. The officers had been trailing her through the park when they saw her walk up to me. They watched her try to brush my pocket. They watched her partner stand up. They waited for the right moment to catch her without letting the guys interfere. She wasn't planning a date. She was planning a distraction. I was supposed to be victim number 3. When they dragged her away, she kept shouting that it wasn't fair, that I didn't even know her, that she wasn't done. The officers told me she'd get dozens of profiles with different names and different fake photos, all stolen, all curated to target specific types of men, guys who looked quiet, trusting, or distracted easily. Walking home that day didn't feel real. Every time I touched my pocket, I thought about how close she got to taking my phone without me noticing. Every time I replayed her fake smile, I realized it was never about meeting me. It was about what she could take before I realized something was wrong. And if the undercover officers hadn't jumped out when they did, I would have walked right into the quiet part of the park, with not just her, but two men ready to grab anything I didn't notice them take. I still think about the first 5 minutes of that date more than anything else, because those 5 minutes tricked me into relaxing when I shouldn't have. He showed up looking normal. Not perfect, not too polished, just a regular guy with a regular jacket and a regular smile. He said my name with this soft tone like he was genuinely glad I came. And I remember thinking maybe, for once, I didn't choose a complete disaster. I was wrong. So wrong it almost feels embarrassing now. We went for a walk because the cafe I suggested was too crowded. He said he liked quiet places better because it made it easier to remember moments properly. I thought he was just being cheesy, but then he asked if he could take a photo of me. Not a selfie, not a cute picture together, just a picture of me standing under some trees. I laughed awkwardly and asked why. He shrugged and said he liked remembering people exactly how they looked when he first met them. It was weird, but not weird enough to end the date. People have stranger hobbies. So I let him take one picture. He didn't even tell me to pose or smile. He lifted his phone for 1 second, snapped a shot, and nodded to himself like he just checked something off a list. No compliment, no reaction, just confirmation. A little while later, he asked for another picture, this time near the river. Again, he didn't take long. 1 second, one angle, one photo. His camera barely touched his hand properly before he locked the screen again. I started feeling uneasy, like he wasn't taking pictures of me, but pictures around me. The backgrounds, the distances, the angles. Every time he told me to stand somewhere, it was framed the same way. Houses behind me, flats behind me, rows of windows behind me. He wasn't capturing my face. He was capturing locations. I tried to ignore it and keep walking, but the tension kept building. He barely talked anymore. He just told me to stand here, stand there, turn a little, look up, look down. When we finally reached the area near my road, the feeling in my chest got way worse. He didn't know where I lived, but he asked if we could walk a little further because he said the lighting on this street was perfect. The street he pointed at was the one right behind my flat. My stomach twisted so hard I nearly stepped back. I told him I needed to get home for something urgent, and he instantly offered to walk me to my door. Not in a caring way. In a way that sounded like he didn't want to lose sight of me. I told him no. He insisted. I said no again louder. He finally backed off a little and said he'd message me. But when he walked away, he didn't look disappointed. He didn't look confused. He didn't look sad the date ended early. He looked satisfied. Like he got everything he came for. That night, my whole body felt uneasy when I sat in my room. I kept thinking about the photos, the angles, the way he always positioned me facing something important. I told myself I was overthinking. I watched something on my laptop, tried to sleep, scrolled my phone until my eyes hurt. Then, around midnight, blue flashing lights filled my room, right outside my window. My heart dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I ran to the curtains and pulled them open just a little. Police were everywhere. 2 cars, bright torches, voices echoing down the street, and then I saw him. The guy from the date, standing across the road, phone raised, taking pictures of my building, specifically my windows. One officer shouted at him. He tried to run but didn't make it far. They tackled him onto the pavement and ripped the phone out of his hand. More officers came rushing in from the side road like they had been waiting for him. I didn't even realize I had backed away from the window until my legs hit the bed. My whole body started shaking as I heard more shouting outside. A few minutes later, someone knocked on my door. It was the police. They asked if I'd been with him earlier that day. I told them everything, every picture, every weird comment, every angle he made me stand in. The officers looked at each other like this wasn't surprising at all. They said he wasn't just some guy from a dating app. He was connected to a burglary ring. They targeted flats by using dating apps to gain access to information about people's locations. The men in the group would meet women, pretend to be into them, and take photos for memories, but the photos were actually scouting material for break-ins. They needed pictures of windows, locks, street entrances, blind spots, lighting, escape routes, security cameras. Everything he photographed around me matched what they needed. One officer showed me the folder on his phone. It had dozens of albums, each album named after a different girl. And mine had only one photo of my face, but nearly 20 of my building, all taken without me realizing, because he made me stand exactly where he needed me so the camera could capture the places behind me. They arrested him for multiple attempted break-ins, conspiracy charges, and stalking. He'd been out that night specifically to get photos of my flat, and someone living across the street saw him holding his phone at windows and called the police. If that neighbor hadn't done that, I wouldn't have known a thing. I would have woken up one morning to missing things, or worse, someone standing inside my room. When the police left, I sat on the floor shaking, thinking about every picture he took. He didn't want memories. He wanted maps. Maps of homes. Maps of windows. Maps of people he never actually cared about. And I was supposed to be the next target. I still don't know what possessed me to say yes. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way she made everything sound exciting without giving any real details. She messaged me on a dating app late one night saying she was going to a viewing party and thought it would be fun if I joined. I asked what that meant, and she said it was like a social experiment mixed with a mini event. Nothing serious, nothing weird. She said everyone there loved meeting new people, and that it wasn't intense like club nights or awkward like speed dating. She said it was free. She said it was safe, and she kept saying she thought I'd fit the vibe. That last part got me. I wanted to feel included. So I said yeah. She sent an address that looked normal on maps, some converted studio on the edge of town. She said the event started at 9 and to text her when I arrived so she could come down and get me. When I reached the building, the first thing I noticed was the noise. Not music, not talking. This weird, layered sound of people cheering and clapping. It wasn't loud enough to sound like a club, but it wasn't quiet either. It was like a game show happening behind a wall. She texted me saying come straight up, doors open. That should have been my cue to turn around, but I didn't. The staircase was narrow and the walls were covered in posters for random events that looked fake, like someone printed them at home. Social night, creative gathering, blind spots. None of them had dates. None had locations, just vibes. When I reached the top floor, I saw a tall man standing by the entrance like a bouncer, but he wasn't wearing anything official, just a hoodie and jeans. He looked me up and down before opening the door without saying a word. Inside, everything hit me at once. There were rows of chairs facing the stage, bright lights hanging from metal stands, a long table full of people holding phones and cash, a big projector screen showing two people sitting at a small table, both blindfolded. I honestly thought I walked into a reality show filming, or some weird student project. People were laughing, commenting, placing cash on the table like they were betting on horses instead of humans. My date waved at me from across the room. She looked completely normal, like someone who didn't realize everything around her was insane. She guided me through the crowd and said this was a blindfolded date challenge, where strangers meet without seeing each other, and the audience guesses which pair will match based on vibes alone. I laughed at first because I didn't think it was that deep. I thought maybe it was some harmless underground event where people bet stupid amounts of money for fun. Then I noticed something. The projector was showing the faces of the blindfolded people, but the faces didn't match the bodies. The video was edited. The faces were not real. They were stolen photos. My stomach dropped. I couldn't stop looking at the screen. The woman on stage had brown hair and a bun, but the face on the projector showed a girl with blonde hair. The guy on stage had a beard, but the screen showed a clean-shaven man smiling like he was in a totally different moment. The faces were too smooth, too frozen. Too filtered. They weren't live. They were stolen photos pasted onto someone else's body. I leaned closer to my date and whispered, asking what exactly this was. She shrugged like it was nothing and said the organizers liked to make it look aesthetic. But the vibe in the room wasn't aesthetic. It felt illegal. It felt wrong. It felt like the kind of thing people don't talk about outside the building. People kept betting. The host kept yelling out numbers. The blindfolded people had no clue what they were being used for. I told her I wanted to leave. She grabbed my wrist and said to wait until the next round because she wanted me to see the twist. Before I could argue, the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Then everything went dark. For 2 full seconds, there was no sound, no cheering, no laughing, just pitch black and silence. Then, boom, the door slammed open so hard the wall cracked. Flashlights, shouting, boots hitting the floor, police, dozens of them. People started screaming and running. Someone knocked over a metal stand, another tripped on cables, someone else shouted to hide. The room exploded into chaos instantly. An officer grabbed my shoulder and yelled for me to keep my hands visible. I couldn't even get words out because everything was happening too fast. They arrested half the room on the spot. They pulled blindfolds off people who were crying and confused. They cut the projector cables. They ripped open bags full of cash. The host tried to run, but an officer tackled him right at the door. My date tried to blend into the crowd, but 2 officers cornered her immediately. I heard one of them shout her full name. Not the name she used online. A completely different name. That's when I realized everything she told me was fake. Her photos. Her profile. Her job. Her age. Everything. They handcuffed her while she stared at the floor, refusing to look up. When things finally calmed down, an officer pulled me aside to explain what the event actually was. It wasn't a social experiment. It wasn't a dating event. It was an illegal gambling ring where organizers used stolen identities to promote fake blindfolded dates online. The people attending thought they were going on normal first dates, but the organizers blindfolded them, filmed them, edited their faces using stolen images, and streamed the fake versions to betting groups. They used dating apps to recruit new participants by catfishing them with flirty messages from fake profiles. And the girl who invited me? She wasn't a guest. She was part of the recruitment network. She lured people in so the organizers always had fresh faces to blindfold. The officer told me they had been tracking the group for months, and tonight was the first time they caught enough people in one place to shut it down completely. Standing in that trash studio, lights shattered, cables sparking, people handcuffed on the floor, I realized something terrifying. If the police had been 15 minutes later, I would have been the next one on stage. Blindfolded. Recorded. Betted on. Edited into someone I wasn't. And I would have had no idea. I should have gone home the second I saw him. That's the part that keeps replaying in my head. Not the ending. Not the police bursting in. Not the shouting. Just that first moment when he stood up from the cafe table and waved at me, and a whole body silently screamed that something wasn't right. His photos online made him look mid-20s, clean haircut, casual clothes, soft smile. The guy who stood waiting for me that day looked nothing like that. His face was older, easily 10 years older. His hairline was different, his beard patchy, his eyes tired in a way that didn't match someone who had just taken a selfie for a dating profile. But he was already smiling at me like he knew me, like we talked for months instead of a week. And because I didn't want to look rude or dramatic, I still sat down. I told myself maybe he used old photos. Maybe he edited them. Maybe he was insecure. But even when I sat down, something inside me tightened. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He leaned forward in this intense way that made it feel like he had been waiting for this moment too long. He stared at me like he was memorizing my face, not meeting it. I tried small talk. He talked too much. He talked too fast, and none of it sounded like the person I messaged. Online, he'd been calm, slow, chill. In person, he was jittery, jumpy, talking over me, asking questions too personal, too quickly. Then he started commenting on my clothes. How I looked better in person. How he liked the shape of my shoulders. How he liked girls who didn't wear too much makeup. It didn't sound like compliments. It sounded like he was evaluating me. 5 minutes in, I already knew I wanted to leave. I had made up my excuse in my head. A friend needed me. I had a class. I had forgotten something at home. Anything. When I stood up, he stood up too. Fast. Too fast. He stepped in front of the chair before I could pull it out fully. I awkwardly laughed and said I just needed the bathroom, but he didn't move. He put one hand on the back of the chair and one hand on the table, blocking me without actually touching me. He said I didn't need to rush. He said we weren't done talking. He said it in a soft voice, but with the sharpness underneath like he was warning me. My heartbeat kicked into overdrive. I sat back down slowly, trying not to escalate anything. I told myself I'd wait for a moment when he wasn't paying attention. I'd text someone. I'd signal the waiter. Something. Anything. But every time I shifted, he watched me. Every time I looked around, he leaned closer. Every time I touched my phone, he asked me who I was messaging. People in the cafe began looking over. Not because they knew something was wrong, but because his energy was so tense and weird that it radiated across the room. Then things escalated in this sudden, terrifying way. A waitress came over to ask if we needed anything, and I swear the look he gave her made her step back. His whole posture changed. His jaw tightened. His shoulders squared. Then the door slammed open. Hard. 2 men walked in. Not random customers. Not security. Police. The second they stepped inside, my date's entire face changed. He went pale. Then rigid. Then still. Like someone had unplugged him from reality. One officer shouted his name. A name I didn't recognize. Not the name he gave me. Not the one on the app. Not even close. He bolted from the table so fast my chair tipped. But he didn't get far. The officers caught him near the counter, dragging him down as he yelled and kicked. One of the cups on the counter shattered. People screamed. A child started crying. It all happened in seconds, but the shock made it feel slow. When they finally pinned him down, one of the officers came to me, asking if he hurt me. I said no, but my voice was shaking too much to sound convincing. The officer told me why they were there. Someone had reported him earlier that morning for trying to force 2 different women to stay with him during their dates. He cornered one of them in a pub hallway. He blocked another woman from leaving her car. Both of them escaped and reported him. The police had been tracking his movements for hours because he used multiple fake profiles. His photos were stolen. His name was fake. Everything about him was constructed to look trustworthy and harmless. When they pulled him up from the floor, he stared at me with this strange expression. Not angry, not sad, but disappointed. Like he genuinely believed I should have stayed. Like I owed him something. They handcuffed him and pushed him outside while he kept mumbling that it wasn't fair, that people misunderstood him, that he just wanted someone who wouldn't leave. One officer told me they believed he intentionally matched with women who looked kind or quiet, women who wouldn't make a scene, women he thought he could intimidate into staying. When they checked his phone later, they found messages lined up with at least 8 different women, all using different fake names for himself, sending them the same copy-paste introductions he sent me. He wasn't looking for love. He was looking for someone whose fear wouldn't make them run. I left the cafe shaking, clutching my phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Every part of me felt heavy. Every step felt unreal. Because the truth hit me all at once. If those 2 officers hadn't burst in at that exact moment, I don't know if I would have made it out on my own. The whole date felt wrong before I even understood why. It wasn't her. It wasn't me. It wasn't the restaurant. It was the way random people kept staring at us like we were some kind of problem waiting to happen. At first, I thought maybe I had something on my face, or maybe she looked too young or too old next to me, or maybe people were just being weird. But the staring got worse. It wasn't glancing. It wasn't curiosity. It was this long, intense, uncomfortable kind of staring that makes your stomach twist even if nothing has happened yet. She didn't notice, or maybe she did notice and chose to ignore it. She talked a lot, way more than she had online. Online, she typed slow and soft. In person, she talked fast, jumping from one topic to another, like she was trying to distract me from the fact that the entire room felt like it was leaning toward our table. I kept catching people looking at me specifically, not her. Me, and not in a normal way, but in this angry, confused, disgusted way. One woman clenched her jaw when she walked past. Another guy shook his head at me like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A family at the corner table kept whispering and glancing over. I finally leaned back and whispered to her, asking if something was wrong behind me. She just laughed like it was nothing and told me people in this area were weird. But the thing is, they weren't looking at her at all, only me. Like they recognized me. Like I'd done something to them personally. I tried to brush it off, but then one man walked by our table and muttered something under his breath. I didn't catch the full sentence, but I heard one word clearly. Scammer. My chest dropped. Hard. I didn't do anything. I had never scammed anyone, never even posted anything dodgy online. I wasn't that type of person. I wanted to confront him, but I didn't even know what I'd be confronting him about. So I just sat there, pretending everything was normal, even though my heart felt like it was trying to climb out of my throat. The date went on awkwardly until the girl excused herself to go to the bathroom. I sat alone, staring at my drink, trying to figure out what was going on. The staring had stopped for a moment, almost like everyone was waiting for something. And that's when 2 police officers walked through the door. They didn't hesitate. They didn't look at anyone else. They came straight to me. One of them asked me my name. The voice he used wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't friendly either. It was the voice someone uses when they already expect you to lie. When I told them who I was, they asked me to step outside. People in the restaurant kept watching, their faces tightening like they were confirming something. Outside, the officers asked if I knew why they stopped me. I said no. They told me multiple people in the area had reported seeing a man who fit my exact description. A man connected to a catfishing scam that stole thousands from women. A man who vanished after promising relationships, trading money, or disappearing with deposits for fake flats and fake holiday bookings. I squared my legs, nearly gave out. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about. I told them I'd never done anything like that. I told them I didn't even know those people. They didn't believe me right away. They asked me to come down to the station. Not arrested, but for questioning. Which basically means you're not leaving until we sort this out. They asked me everything. Where I was at certain times. Who I talked to recently. Which apps I'd used. They asked about old messages, old accounts, even old emails. Every time I answered, they looked at each other like something wasn't adding up. Hours passed. Actual hours. They kept leaving the room, coming back, writing things down, repeating questions like they were waiting for me to slip up. Then finally one officer walked in holding a printed stack of images. Mugshots? Victim photos? Evidence? I didn't know. He laid them out in front of me one by one. Every single photo was of someone who looked like me, but none of them were me. Different jawline, different height, different tattoos, different everything. But close enough that if someone wasn't paying attention, or someone only saw a picture online, they would think it was me. That's when they showed me the dating profile the scammer used. My face. My smile. My exact haircut. My tattoos photoshopped onto someone else's arm. Photos from angles I didn't even remember taking but apparently existed somewhere online. And right under the photos was the name he used, similar to mine, but not exact. Close enough that people saw me and instantly assumed it was the same guy. I felt sick. My face was being used to scam people. To manipulate them. To steal from them. To disappear with their money. And the girl I was on a date with, she knew. The officers told me she'd already left the restaurant by the time they came back inside. They checked the bathroom, the exits, the cameras. She slipped out fast. She wasn't on a date with me because she liked me. She was on a date with me because she wanted to see the real scammer in person. She wanted to confirm the man who scammed her friend. She set me up without even telling me. She told her friend where she was and who she was meeting. Her friend told the person she thought I scammed. That person recognized me when they walked into the restaurant. And that person called the police. All because a stranger online stole my face. It took the officers until midnight to track down the real Catfish. They found him across town using another fake name, pretending to rent out a flat for a made-up price of $800 a month. When they showed me his real photo, I felt my stomach twist again. He looked nothing like me, but he looked enough like my photoshopped images. He stole my face and rearranged it to fit his lies. When they finally let me go, I stepped outside into the cold night feeling like I had lost something I didn't even know I could lose: control over my own identity. People stared at me like I was the villain. The girl left without saying a word. My face wasn't even mine anymore. The whole thing started looking completely harmless. He wasn't the type of guy who came across too strong or too weird. His profile looked simple: a couple of selfies, a picture of him sitting on a sofa, one where he was holding a mug near a big window. At first glance, nothing stood out. It wasn't until much later that I realized all the signs were sitting right in front of me, and I didn't connect any of them until it was already too late. We started talking one night when I was bored and half scrolling. He messaged first with something normal, nothing cheesy. Just a question about my favorite food. His replies were polite and kind of soft, almost shy. I liked that he didn't push me or overshare. He kept things light and didn't try to dig into my personal life too deep. That felt safe. He said he didn't like loud places and suggested we go for a walk instead of getting drinks. I agreed, because honestly, I wasn't in the mood for a packed restaurant anyway. The place he chose was a busy park with loads of people walking dogs or running, so it didn't feel isolated or strange. When I met him, he looked exactly like his photos, which almost made me relax completely. He was shorter than I expected, but he smiled in this calm way that made him look harmless. He talked slowly, choosing his words carefully. But something about him felt slightly off, and I couldn't tell what. It wasn't anything dramatic, just tiny things. The way he kept glancing over his shoulder. The way he hugged himself like he wasn't used to being outside. The way he reacted every time someone walked near us, almost like he wanted to step away but forced himself not to. He asked a lot of questions about where I lived, who I lived with, whether I felt safe there. I thought he was trying to be supportive or something, but the more he asked, the stranger it felt. At one point, he said something weird about how he knew what it was like to be around danger, and then quickly changed the subject like he didn't mean to say that out loud. The more we walked, the more the weird behavior started to stack up. He would zone out mid-sentence and stare into space for a few seconds before snapping back to the conversation. He jumped every time a car horn sounded in the distance, and he kept his phone on silent, but checked it constantly, swiping fast like he didn't want me to see the screen. But none of that compared to the moment everything finally hit me. We sat down on a bench, and he joked about how he never takes good photos. I said his profile pictures looked fine, and he laughed again and asked which ones. I clicked on his profile to show him. When I opened his photos, that's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The background in one of his photos wasn't a normal bedroom or a lounge like I assumed. It was a very specific room. Pale blue walls, a notice board with colorful paper pinned to it, a gray sofa with a patterned blanket, and right above the shoulder, half cut off, was a poster I recognized instantly. I had been to that place before. It was a women's refuge, a secured one, a place you don't get into unless you're staying there or working there. And he didn't work there. I knew he didn't. My body reacted before my brain did. I stopped talking completely. My hands went cold. My chest tightened. My brain started racing through every possible explanation, and none of them made sense. He shouldn't have been inside that building at all. He watched my face change and asked what was wrong. I didn't answer because I didn't trust my voice. I pretended my phone died and stood up, mumbling something about needing to go home. He grabbed my sleeve lightly, not forceful but enough to make panic shoot straight through my chest. I pulled away and said I had to meet someone. He didn't argue. He just stared at me with this blank expression, like he was trying to figure out what I'd realize. I left the park fast, walking instead of running because I didn't want him to follow me. When I got home, I blocked him instantly. I didn't even think about being polite or giving a reason. I just blocked everything and tried to forget the whole thing. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, police came to my door. Not in a dramatic way, but enough to make my heart drop. They asked if I had spoken to a man using that name on the app. I told them yes and explained everything. The officers exchanged looks, the type that tell you things are worse than you think. They said he had been sneaking into a women's refuge pretending to be a staff member. He took advantage of the fact that people inside didn't know every worker's face. He gained access multiple times by following actual staff through secure doors. He had taken pictures inside, pretending he worked there. He even spoke to some of the residents asking personal questions he had no business asking. Someone finally reported him after noticing he appeared in a photo online wearing a lanyard that wasn't issued by the refuge. Once staff checked CCTV, they realized he had been there far more times than anyone realized. And when they checked his online activity, they found out he'd been using dating apps to meet women while pretending to be this gentle, harmless guy. He used the refuge photos to look trustworthy, to make people think he worked in a safe environment. When they asked him why he went inside, he said he liked the atmosphere, that he wanted to feel important, that he liked being around people who wouldn't question him. They didn't tell me everything, just that he was being held for multiple offenses. One officer asked me if he tried to meet me again after I blocked him. Apparently, he sent 4 messages to the app before they locked his profile, all asking where I went, all saying he thought we had a connection, all sent within minutes of each other like he was panicking. The last one said he hoped I didn't tell anyone about the place. Even now, my chest goes tight thinking about how close I sat to him, how he smiled like he had nothing to hide, how he walked calmly beside me knowing full well he was living under layers of lies he stitched together to seem harmless. He didn't catfish to flirt. He catfished to get access to more people, more lives, more stories he wasn't meant to know. I still don't know how I didn't clock it the second I walked in. I always thought I'd be sharper, like I'd spot red flags fast, but that night proved I was way too relaxed for my own good. Everything started normal. She messaged me on a dating app with a profile that honestly looked better than most. Not too filtered, not too staged. Just a girl with brown hair, a soft smile, and a flat that looked tidy in the background. She talked like someone who had her life together. She kept the conversation casual but consistent, and nothing she said felt fake. She asked to meet in a cafe near her road. And when I showed up, she actually looked like her photos, which almost made me drop my guard completely. She seemed shy in a cute way, not awkward, just someone who wasn't used to dates. She laughed at everything I said, even things that weren't funny, and kept brushing her hair back like she was nervous. It made me think she liked me more than I expected. After half an hour, she said we should go back to her flat to watch something because the cafe was getting too loud. I wasn't stupid, but she didn't give off any weird vibes. She pointed down the road toward a normal-looking block and said she lived on the 2nd floor. Nothing strange so far. When we reached her flat, she unlocked the door quickly and stepped inside before me. I followed, expecting a cozy little one-bedroom place like in her pictures. And at first glance, it did look similar. The same yellow lamp, the same sofa, the same rug. But the second I really looked around properly, something didn't add up. There were men's clothes everywhere. Not just one hoodie or a pair of shoes. Everywhere. Joggers draped over a chair. A jacket on the sofa. Work boots by the radiator. Boxers on the floor near the bedroom door. Not one or two things. Enough that it looked like an entire second person lived there. I tried to joke about it, but the words wouldn't come out because my brain was already piecing the situation together. She followed my eyes and quickly said the clothes belonged to her cousin who stayed over sometimes. But she said it so fast, like she rehearsed it, and refused to look directly at any of the items. Then she rushed to the kitchen, saying she needed to grab drinks. She left me standing there in the living room like she didn't want me moving too much. That's when I noticed something else. The photos on her wall. In the app, she posted pictures of her living room with framed photos behind her. But in person, the frames were empty. Completely empty. Just blank cardboard inside. She had staged the photos. The longer I stood there, the more things looked wrong. The curtains didn't match the rods. Half the drawers were open but empty. A PlayStation controller on the table, but no PlayStation in sight. It wasn't a cozy flat. It was a set. Something inside me whispered to leave. Not run, not panic, just quietly back up and walk out. My heart was thumping so loud I felt sick. I took one step toward the door. And someone knocked. Hard. 3 loud hits that made the whole floor vibrate. I froze. She froze in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes went wide for a split second before she forced a smile and whispered that it was probably her neighbor. But she didn't move to answer it. She didn't even breathe properly. The knocking came again, louder this time. Then a voice. Police. Open the door. My whole body tensed because in that moment, I realized two things at once. One, they weren't here for me. Two, she wasn't scared of who was at the door. She was scared because she thought the person knocking might come inside and see me. She whispered for me to stay quiet, stay low, stay behind the sofa. She tried to act calm as she walked toward the door, but her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't even turn the lock properly. The second she opened it, two officers stepped inside, forceful but controlled. One of them asked her where her boyfriend was. Not in a confused way. In a way that sounded like this wasn't the first time they'd come looking for him. She stuttered something about not knowing, saying he wasn't home, saying he left earlier. The officer didn't believe a word. He pushed past her and scanned the room. The other officer saw me immediately. He asked who I was. I said my name and that I was on a date. Both officers exchanged this look, like everything suddenly made too much sense. The first officer told me to step outside. The second held her by the arm so she wouldn't bolt or grab anything. Out in the hallway, they explained the part that made my stomach drop harder than anything. She wasn't single. She never had been. Her boyfriend, the guy they were hunting, had outstanding warrants for robberies targeting men he lured with her fake profiles. She would invite men over, make them comfortable. Then her boyfriend would show up pretending to be the angry partner catching them in the act. While the victim panicked and tried to explain, he would rob them. Phones, wallets, watches, everything. Sometimes he forced the victim to transfer money too. They had done this to multiple men around the area, enough that the police finally linked the incident and identified her flat as the connection point. Tonight, they tracked her boyfriend's location to somewhere close by. They thought he might come back here, and that's why they knocked. When they separated us to question us, she cracked. She admitted she used dating apps to find victims. She admitted she staged the flat to look safe. She admitted she planned to stall me long enough for her boyfriend to arrive. He was supposed to come through the bedroom window. That's why the window was slightly open. That's why the clothes were everywhere. That's why she kept glancing toward the back room. He was late. If the police hadn't arrived when they did, I would have met him. And not in a friendly way. They arrested her on the spot. They kept me outside until backup arrived because they weren't sure if the boyfriend was hiding in the area. Walking home with police escorting me down the street didn't even feel real. I kept thinking about the empty frames, the staged photos, the slightly open window, the clothes that weren't hers. She didn't bring me there to date. She brought me there to stall. The weirdest part about that night is how normal it seemed at the start. There was nothing creepy, nothing awkward, nothing that made me think something was off. It actually felt like one of the few dates where things were going right. He was good looking in a clean, effortless way. Not someone who tried too hard. Not someone who filtered every picture. Just genuinely handsome. He had that calm confidence too, the kind where he didn't have to talk a lot to make the moment feel easy. He walked in wearing a gray jacket, hair pushed back like he'd been in a hurry but still looked good somehow. When he spotted me, he smiled like he already knew we'd get along. And honestly, that smile made me relax way too quickly. We sat down in a booth near the window. The restaurant wasn't packed, just a mix of couples and families, soft music in the background, people clinking glasses. The kind of place where you don't expect anything dramatic to happen ever. He talked about simple things at first. Music, food, some trip he claimed he took last summer. He told me he didn't go out much and preferred smaller restaurants over loud places. He said it made him feel safer. I laughed at that because he didn't look like someone who worried about anything. But looking back, I think he was already paying attention to the exits. There were little things I didn't notice at the time. How he kept glancing over my shoulder. How he shifted his weight the moment someone walked behind him. How he checked his phone screen so fast I barely even saw it light up. But he always returned to the conversation like nothing happened, smiling again, making small jokes, asking real questions. At one point, I excused myself to wash my hands. It wasn't even for long. When I came back, he was still there, sitting normally, scrolling something on his phone. Nothing strange. Nothing rushed. But 10 minutes later, everything flipped. I looked down to grab my drink, and when I looked back up, he was gone. Just gone. No excuse me. No bathroom break. No message. Nothing. His jacket was still on the seat. His half-eaten food was still in front of him. It didn't even look like he stood up properly. It looked like he evaporated. For a full minute, I thought maybe he'd just gone to answer a call, or maybe he saw someone he knew, or maybe he was sick. I waited, trying not to look stupid, but every second that passed made my chest feel tighter. Then the restaurant door opened, and two people walked in. Ordinary clothes, nothing flashy. But something about their faces made the whole room shift. They didn't look around casually like normal customers. They scanned. Hard. They weren't here to eat. Both of them walked straight to the counter and flashed something quickly, something I couldn't see fully, but the staff reacted instantly. The waiter who served us pointed toward the boots, toward me, then toward the door like someone had just run out. That was the exact moment I realized he didn't leave for personal reasons. He ran. He ran the second those two walked in. The officers, because that's clearly what they were, split up. One headed to the back exit, the other rushed outside through the front door. I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind was doing backflips trying to understand why someone would leave so fast over nothing. Why he wouldn't warn me. Why he looked so calm the whole night if he was planning to bolt. A manager walked over to me asking if I was with the man who left. I said yes, completely confused, and he told me officers wanted me to stay put until they came back. My heart dropped, because suddenly it didn't feel like I was on a date anymore. It felt like I had been sitting beside someone who was never meant to be there in the first place. They came back inside about 10 minutes later. They didn't catch him. He was already gone by the time they reached the street. It was like he had a plan for disappearing and didn't hesitate for a second. One officer sat across from me and asked if I knew his real name. I told him the one he used on the app. The officer shook his head like he had expected that. He told me quietly that the man wasn't who he claimed to be. Not even close. He had been using multiple fake identities for years. Different names. Different photos. Different background stories. He wasn't catfishing to flirt or mess around. He was doing it to avoid arrest. He was wanted for identity theft. Serious identity theft. Not stolen credit cards or fake profiles for fun. He had stolen actual people's details. Full identities. Bank info. Addresses. Everything. He would rotate who he pretended to be every few months depending on how close the investigations got. The officer said they didn't know he was in the area until earlier that day when one of the victims reported new activity connected to him. They tracked a location ping through one of the fake accounts and traced it to this part of town. I was lucky I got out when I did. I swear this is the one date I never stopped thinking about, not because of how it ended, but because of how normal it felt right at the start. It didn't look like a trap. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like something random and creative, the kind of thing you tell your friends as a joke later. That's how she sold it to me. She said she was an artist working on a project too big for her flat, so she rented a warehouse outside town to build everything. Her vibe online matched it too. Messy hair, paint on her hands, weird selfies where she made faces instead of trying to look pretty. I liked that she wasn't trying so hard. She talked like someone who lived inside their own head half the time, drifting between ideas and forgetting to finish sentences. When she invited me to see her art, it didn't sound creepy because she made it sound like I'd be the first person to see something she had been working on for months. And I won't lie, that felt cool. Like she trusted me enough to show me something she didn't show others. She told me to meet her at a bus stop near the industrial estate. I thought it was weird, but she said the warehouse didn't have parking and it was easier if she walked me there. It was still daylight, and there were workers around moving crates and trucks going in and out, so nothing felt wrong. She came around the corner wearing this oversized hoodie covered in paint splatters. Same girl from the photos. Same short, messy hair. Same tired eyes. She smiled like she'd been waiting all day. She said she was excited and kept talking about how the project might not make sense yet, but would soon. We walked deeper into the industrial area where the buildings got emptier and quieter. The workers disappeared. The sound of trucks faded. Even the wind felt heavier somehow. She pointed to a big gray building that looked abandoned, with rust around the doors and broken windows. She said the landlord didn't care what she did inside as long as she paid for the space. That's when a little voice in my head whispered that this was weird. But she looked so calm and normal that I convinced myself it was fine. Creative people choose weird spaces all the time. She unlocked the side door and pushed it open. The smell hit first. Not paint. Not wood. something stale like damp air that had been trapped for weeks. She stepped inside and waved for me to follow. The warehouse was dark except for a few lights she plugged into extension cords. They hung from hooks and made long shadows stretch across the floor. I could see canvases leaning against walls, tarps thrown over stuff, paint buckets stacked in corners. It looked messy but believable. Until I saw movement in the corner. At first I thought it was part of the art, something covered in cloth shifting because of the draft. But then I heard a muffled sound, like someone trying to speak through fabric. I stopped walking. She didn't notice at first. She kept talking about texture and lighting and space, but my eyes were locked on the far corner where something wasn't right. I stepped forward slowly and a light from one of the lamps hit the floor properly. That's when I froze. There weren't props under those sheets. There were men. 3 of them. Tied up. Hands bound behind their backs. Ropes around their ankles. Tape across their mouths. Their eyes were wide and scared when they saw me. One of them jerked his head like he was warning me to run. My throat went dry instantly. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even think. Everything in my body wanted to move, but my legs wouldn't. She finally realized I wasn't beside her anymore. She turned around slowly, her face shifting from excited to blank in 1 second. She didn't look shocked that I'd seen them. She didn't panic. She just stared at me with this expression like she was trying to decide what to do next. Then she said something like she could explain. Explain. As if there was anything to explain. Before she could take another step, a loud thumping noise echoed outside. Not footsteps. Not trucks. Something heavier. Something rhythmic. Something coming from above. Then a beam of light shot across the broken window. A helicopter. Hovering directly above the warehouse. She whipped her head toward the ceiling like she didn't expect it to happen this soon. That's when officers started shouting orders from outside, voices booming through megaphones. Police. Exit with your hands up. My heart slammed so hard I thought it would tear out of my chest. She looked at me with this wild, betrayed expression, like I had personally caused all of this. Then she bolted toward the back of the warehouse. The men tied up started making noise, kicking against the floor, trying to get attention. The next few seconds were chaos. Officers smashed the main door open. More light flooded in. Voices overlapped. Boots thundered across the concrete. Someone yelled that one of the victims had escaped earlier and sent the location. Another shouted that she was running toward the back exit. I didn't move until an officer grabbed my arm and dragged me away from the center of the room, asking me if I was hurt. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. They found her trying to sneak out through a side door. She fought, screaming that her project wasn't finished, that she needed more time, that everyone misunderstood her. It didn't sound like she was scared of being arrested. It sounded like she was angry someone had interrupted her plans. They carried her out kicking. One officer stayed with me while the others cut the ropes off the men on the floor. They were shaking so badly they couldn't even stand at first. One of them read someone earlier that morning begging for help before she knocked him unconscious again. He managed to crawl to a door and escape when she went outside. That's the message police tracked. I don't know how long I stayed in that warehouse. Everything blurred together. The lights, the shouting, the cold air blowing in through the broken door. All I know is this. She didn't bring me to see art. She brought me to join them. To be part of whatever she was building in her head. To be the next body on the floor. I walked out past those mattresses and ropes and lights, realizing how easily I could have ended up tied to the ground, waiting for someone else to escape and report the location. I still think about how normal she seemed at first. Not perfect, not suspicious, just someone who looked like she lived the same kind of life I did. Her photos were simple selfies, nothing too edited. Her room in the background looked small but tidy. She told me she lived in a studio apartment close to town and liked having people over because she hated long walks at night. Everything she said felt casual and honest, the type of chatting that doesn't make you overthink. We messaged for a week before she invited me over. She kept saying she wanted to show me the dinner she'd been practicing and that her place was tiny but cozy. I wasn't planning on staying long anyway. Just hang out, eat, maybe watch something, then go home. She sent the address, and it didn't look weird. It was in a normal block of flats, the kind where all the doors looked the same and the hallways smell like someone always cooked too much garlic. When I got there, she opened the door fast, almost like she had been standing right behind it waiting. She smiled normally, but her eyes looked tired in a way that didn't match her photos. She said she was just stressed from cleaning last minute and laughed it off. I didn't think anything of it. People rush before guests come. The second I stepped inside, though, something felt off, and I couldn't explain why at first. The air felt heavy, too warm, like the heat had been running for hours. The room didn't smell like dinner. It didn't smell like anything close to food. It smelled like dust and old fabric. She told me to take my shoes off and sit down while she grabbed something from the other side of the room. The place wasn't how she described it. She said studio, but the layout looked more like someone had ripped out walls and crammed things together without planning. Then my eyes adjusted to the lighting, and that's when I saw them. Mattresses. Multiple mattresses. Not stacked. Not stored. Spread out across the floor like someone expected people to sleep on them. Some had sheets. Some didn't. One looked stained. Another had a hoodie thrown on it that didn't look like it belonged to her. Too big, too rough. I tried to ask her about it, but my mouth wouldn't even move. My body just went cold as I kept looking around. There were cameras too. Not big ones, small ones. One on a shelf pointing down, one near the corner pointing toward the mattresses, and another half hidden behind a stack of boxes. The boxes themselves looked weird, like someone grabbed random stuff quickly and shoved it inside. Clothes, empty water bottles, a phone case, a charger without the cable, a man's trainers. Nothing lined up with her vibe at all. She noticed me looking around too much and walked over quickly, blocking part of my view. She kept saying the mattresses were for friends who stayed over sometimes, and the cameras were old ones the landlord left behind. None of that made sense. Landlords don't leave cameras behind, and no one has 4 mattresses in a studio unless something's seriously wrong. Before I could ask anything out loud, she told me she just needed to grab a drink from the cupboard near the door. Her voice changed slightly, like she was trying to keep it steady. She walked over to the cupboard, opened it, and then paused for a second longer than she should have. Like she was listening. Not to me, to something outside. That's when I heard it. Boots pounding down the hallway. Fast. Too many to be just neighbors. She looked back at me with this expression that didn't even look like fear. More like she knew something was coming and didn't know how to escape it. Then the door exploded inward. Police flooded in, shouting over each other as they pushed her to the ground. They told me to get against the wall and not move. I didn't even have time to react. My heart jumped into my throat so fast I thought I was going to pass out. One officer dragged her hands behind her back while she kept yelling that she didn't do anything. Another officer went straight for the cameras and unplugged them. Someone else opened the boxes and pulled out things I didn't want to look at too closely. One of them finally looked at me and asked if I was involved. I shook my head so fast it probably looked pathetic. I told him I'd only been there for a few minutes. He nodded like he expected that answer. He told me in a calm voice that they had tracked the location from a tip earlier that day. Someone reported a potential trafficking setup operating out of a flat matching this address. They had been monitoring the area for hours, trying to confirm movement inside. When they saw her return with someone new, they acted. The mattresses. The cameras. The random clothes. The boxes with people's belongings. It wasn't a studio apartment. It was a holding room. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Everything around me became sharp and blurry at the same time. I couldn't process anything except the fact that I almost sat down on one of those mattresses like it was normal. The officer asked if she lured me here through a dating app. When I said yes, he wrote something down and told me quietly that this wasn't the first time they'd seen situations like this. They said people use fake profiles to bring strangers into controlled locations, sometimes to target them, sometimes to involve them without them knowing. I kept staring at her while they lifted her up. She didn't look angry. She didn't even cry. She looked tired, like someone who had been doing this for way too long and finally got caught. She didn't look at me once. The officers let her out, and I just stood in the corner of that horrible room, the mattresses right in front of me, the cameras unplugged, the whole place looking like a nightmare someone tried to clean up, but failed. They let me leave once I gave a statement, but walking through that hallway felt unreal, like I stepped into the building as one person and left as someone else. And the thought that still gets stuck in my head is simple. If the police had been 10 minutes later, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know what those mattresses were really for. I don't know what the cameras were recording before I arrived. I just know I wasn't meant to be there for dinner. I always thought I'd be the kind of person who could sense danger before it got near me, like I'd pick up on the vibe or feel something weird and just leave. But that night proved I wasn't as sharp as I liked to believe. It started off as a normal date. Not amazing, not awful, just one of those standard meetups where you try to figure out if the person in front of you is anything like the one you talked to online. He wasn't ugly or weird looking. His pictures matched him enough. He dressed normal, spoke normal, acted normal. Nothing that stood out as dangerous or fake. He talked about his job, his dog, his hobbies, the usual stuff. And honestly, I was just glad he wasn't talking like a robot or staring at me in a creepy way. When the date ended, he offered to drive me home. Not in a dramatic way, but casually, like it was expected. I told him I was fine taking the bus since the stop was right outside, but he kept insisting, saying he didn't like the thought of me walking alone in the dark. It wasn't even that late. But I let him take me because I thought it would be quicker and safer, and didn't want to argue over something that seemed small. The moment I sat in the car, I felt something strange. Not fear, just something. It was clean inside, almost too clean. No random stuff on the floor, no air freshener hanging, no marks on the seats. It looked like it never got used. He made a joke about keeping it tidy, but his voice didn't match his smile. It was off. I reached for the door handle to adjust the seatbelt strap, and that's when I realized the door wouldn't open. It wasn't locked, but it wouldn't push. At first I thought maybe I didn't pull it right, but when I tried again, nothing. It didn't budge. He looked over and told me the car had a child locks because his nephew rode with him sometimes. He laughed like it was a tiny detail, but something in my stomach dropped the second he said it. He didn't offer to unlock it. He didn't even react like it mattered. He just started driving. I tried to calm myself and think rationally. Lots of people have child locks. It doesn't mean anything. But the more he drove, the more uncomfortable I felt. He wasn't heading directly toward my road. He took a different turn, saying it was a shortcut, except it wasn't. I knew the area. There was no shortcut that went in the direction he was taking me. I asked him again where he was going. He said he just needed to stop at the petrol station quickly because he was almost empty. And when I glanced at the fuel gauge, it wasn't even close to empty. That's when panic started crawling at my spine. We pulled into the petrol station, and he told me it'd only be a second. The moment he stepped out, he didn't look at me. Not once. He kept his eyes forward, head slightly down, walking fast. As soon as the door closed, I tried the handle again. Nothing. I tried the window. It didn't work without the car being on. My chest felt tight. I looked at the driver's seat, the lights from the station glowing on the dashboard, and I knew the only way I was getting out was through the front. So I climbed. Literally climbed over the middle console, my knee hitting the gear stick, my elbow smashing into the radio buttons. I didn't even care. I just needed to get out. When I made it to the front seat, I yanked the door handle and the door swung open instantly. I jumped out so fast I nearly fell. A worker behind the glass looked up in surprise as I sprinted toward the shop entrance like something was chasing me. I didn't look back. I just ran inside and stood behind a display shelf because my legs felt too weak to keep moving. The automatic doors slid shut, and for a second everything went silent. Then I heard shouting outside. Not him shouting. Police. 2 cars pulled into the station at the same time, lights flashing, but not with sirens. One officer went straight toward the petrol pumps where he had been standing. Another walked toward the shop, asking if anyone had seen a girl run. I stepped out from behind the shelf, shaking, trying to breathe properly. The officer took one look at me and nodded like he already knew exactly who I was. They walked me outside slowly, keeping me behind them while they cuffed him next to his car. He didn't fight. He didn't ask what was happening. He didn't even look surprised. He only looked irritated like he'd been interrupted. One officer explained everything in simple words because I guess he realized I wasn't processing fast. The car's number plate had been flagged earlier that week. Multiple women had reported strange encounters where the guy they met on dates insisted on driving them somewhere, only for them to notice child locks and weird detours. 2 girls escaped by pretending they felt sick. One jumped out when the car slowed down. Every report mentioned the same detail, the same car, same type, same color, same partial plate. And the worst part is the police had been trying to find the car, but he kept swapping the fake profiles and meeting women in different areas. A new alert went out that evening when someone else reported him trying the same thing. The patrol car closest to the area spotted the plate at the petrol station just seconds after I ran inside. That timing still messes with my head. They asked me if he tried to touch me or threaten me. I said no, but that didn't make anything feel better. He didn't need to touch me for it to be dangerous. The locked doors were enough. The wrong turns were enough. The way he walked away without looking back was enough. When they searched his car, they found his phone with multiple dating apps, different names, different photos. Some were subtle changes, some completely different identities, all used for meeting women, all used for getting them in his car. The officers told me quietly that they believed he was building up to something worse each time, not a one-off, a pattern. I sat on the curb outside the station even after everything was over. My hands were still shaking, and I kept staring at the car he used like it was some kind of trap disguised as a normal vehicle. The same car I almost trusted, the same car I almost stayed in. The whole drive back home with the officers escorting me felt unreal, like the night folded in half and spat me out somewhere else. And the scariest part, he didn't pick me randomly. He picked me because I said I didn't like long walks at night. I swear this whole thing started in the most harmless way possible. It didn't feel creepy or strange at all. It actually felt comforting at first, because the guy messaged me pretending to be someone I read with back in school. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who moved away before we even finished year 11. He didn't come out of nowhere either. He messaged me saying he found my profile through mutuals, and that he couldn't believe how long it had been. And honestly, the way he typed really convinced me it was him. He talked about teachers we had, stupid memories, stuff that wasn't online anywhere. Things only someone from our school would know. That's what messed with me the most. He didn't use general stuff. He mentioned exact details. The little bench outside the maths block where everyone used to sit. The time someone kicked a football through a window and we all blamed a random year 7. Things real. Things specific. Things that felt safe. So when he suggested we meet to catch up, I didn't even think weird. It felt normal. Like reconnecting with someone who used to be part of your life. He suggested the park near the old school since it was halfway for both of us. When I got there, I expected to see someone familiar. Someone with the same vibe I remembered. But the second I saw the man standing by the bench, my stomach dropped. He wasn't my old friend. Not even close. Different height, different build, different energy. He waved at me too quickly, like he'd been practicing the gesture, like he wanted me to feel comfortable before my brain caught up. I walked over slowly, trying not to panic, trying to convince myself maybe he just changed over the years. People do. But the more I stared at him, the more wrong everything felt. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, watching every move I made. And when he finally opened his mouth, his voice wasn't even close to what I remembered. Not the tone, not the way of talking. It didn't match anything. I asked him straight up if he really was who he said he was. He dodged the question completely, laughing it off, and saying people always look different when they grow up. Then he walked closer, too close, and everything in me tightened. I stepped back. He stepped forward. He kept talking, fast, almost rambling, saying he was excited to see me, saying he missed talking to me, saying he had so much to tell me. But none of it sounded real. None of it matched the person I remembered from school. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to check it. A number I didn't recognize had sent one message. Do not leave with him. Officers are coming. Before I could even process that, I heard the crunch of footsteps behind us. Not slow ones. Heavy ones. Running ones. 2 officers grabbed him from behind so fast he didn't even have time to react. One grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back, while the other pushed him down to the grass. People in the park stopped walking. Kids on scooters froze. It all happened so fast it didn't look real. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just stared at me like he'd been waiting for this to happen. One officer asked if I was okay and told me to move away while they restrained him. My legs felt like they were made of air. I couldn't even feel them. I backed up until my back hit a tree. Everything after that felt cloudy. The officers were talking, the man was saying something under his breath, and I couldn't focus on any of it. Then one officer came over to me and explained what was going on. Someone had reported his online accounts earlier that morning. Multiple women came forward saying a man was pretending to be people from their past, using old school details he found through social media scraping, yearbook photos, and group posts. He did it to build trust fast. He used their memories as tools. He used familiar names as masks. They've been tracking his location through one of the reports, and when they noticed he arranged to meet me in a public place, they rushed over so he couldn't take me anywhere else. That text I got. It was sent by the officer who found my number in the report logs. I asked why he used my friend's name specifically. The officer said he targeted people with weaker online footprints from the past, people who wouldn't have lots of photos to compare, people who couldn't instantly check if it was real. Then the officer told me the part that actually made my stomach twist. He wasn't catfishing for attention. He wasn't catfishing for dates. He was grooming multiple women at once, building trust through fake nostalgia so he could isolate them later. Every message he sent me, every detail he used from school, every memory he pretended to share, it wasn't random. It was planned, structured, intentional. He wasn't reconnecting with me. He was hunting me. When they lifted him up, he looked at me again. His expression wasn't angry or sad. It was blank, like I wasn't even a person to him. Just another name on a list he hadn't finished using yet. They put him in the police car and drove off, leaving me sitting on the bench he'd been standing beside. I didn't even cry. I just sat there thinking about the fact that my friend, the real one, had no idea someone used his name to try and reach me. Later that night, I looked him up online. He hadn't posted in years. He probably didn't even know what happened. But someone out there used his photos, his memories, his name, to get close to me. I should have trusted my first instinct the moment she walked in. Something about her energy felt off straight away, like she was constantly listening out for something that wasn't there. She didn't sit down normally either. She sort of hovered over the chair for a second, looking behind her before finally lowering herself like she was expecting someone to tap her shoulder. I told myself she was just anxious, maybe socially awkward, maybe scared of first dates. People had their own stuff, and I didn't want to judge too fast. Her pictures online showed a girl who looked chilled, soft smile, messy hair, cozy clothes. Nothing dramatic or attention-seeking. But the girl who sat in front of me that day looked like she ran to the restaurant. Her hair looked thrown together, her hands kept shaking when she fixed her jacket, and she kept rubbing her thumb over the side of her phone like she was waiting for a message that never came. She barely looked me in the eye, and when she did, her eyes darted around again like she was checking the room for exits. At first, I thought maybe she was scared of me. Maybe she had bad dates before or something. I tried to talk casually to make it feel normal, but she didn't settle at all. Her leg kept bouncing under the table, she kept biting her thumbnail, and every time the restaurant door opened, her whole body flinched. I should have walked out right then, but I didn't. I kept trying to soften the vibe, thinking it was nerves, thinking she just needed time to relax. But then I noticed she kept checking the clock on her phone every few seconds. Not like someone bored, more like someone counting down. When the waiter came over, she barely looked at the menu. She ordered the first thing she pointed at, even though she wasn't really looking at it. She didn't even hear him ask her a second question. Her eyes went past him, toward the front door. She mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom and stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Everyone looked over at her, but she didn't care. She just walked quickly toward the back hallway. I waited, thinking she was probably just embarrassed or overwhelmed. 10 seconds passed. 20. A minute. 2 minutes. Then everything changed at once. The front door of the restaurant slammed open and police stormed inside. Not walking. Running. 2 officers shouted for everyone to stay exactly where they were. People froze with forks halfway to their mouths. A couple dropped their drinks. Someone near the window screamed. I didn't even move. I just stared because I had no idea what was happening. One officer rushed straight to the owner, asking if a girl matching her description had come in. Another officer pointed toward the hallway where she had gone. I'd never watched a raid happen before. Tables shook as officers pushed past them. Napkins fell on the floor. Someone's coat got knocked over. The whole restaurant turned into chaos within seconds. I sat there completely still, heart pounding because I had no clue what this had to do with me. I thought maybe it had nothing to do with our date and I'd just gotten caught in someone else's moment. But then one of the officers walked up to me, asking if I had come in with her. I told him yes, but only a few minutes earlier. He nodded like he expected that answer. He told me to stay seated and not move. His tone wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't soft either. It was the tone you use when dealing with something serious and not wanting anyone to make it worse. Officers went into the back hallway and pulled her out within seconds. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked annoyed, like they had ruined her plan. She kept staring at me with this expression that didn't make sense, like she wanted to explain something but knew she couldn't. They sat her down near the entrance as they questioned her. She kept insisting she was on a date and had been with me the whole time. She looked directly at me like she needed me to confirm it. I didn't speak. I didn't even open my mouth. 2 more officers walked in with a photo printed on a sheet of paper. It was her. Same hair, same face, same jacket she was wearing right then. Except the picture wasn't from a dating app. It was from a CCTV camera, and under it was a timestamp from earlier that same hour. The officer next to me finally explained what was going on. A small shop across town had been robbed less than an hour ago. The security camera caught someone rushing out with a bag of stolen items, wearing the same jacket and trousers she had on. She had apparently shoved the owner when he tried to stop her, grabbed stuff from behind the counter, and ran. Witnesses saw her sprinting away. A patrol car spotted her turning into side streets, but she disappeared after ducking between buildings. They thought she was hiding somewhere nearby. What made it worse was that the shop owner had given a description of her face, clear enough for the alert to go out instantly. The restaurant owner confirmed she walked in only minutes before I did, so she must have rushed straight from the robbery to the date. I didn't understand at first. Why go on a date seconds after committing a robbery? Why come to a public place after doing something that risky? Then the officer explained the part that knocked me sideways. She wasn't here for the date. She was here for the alibi. She wanted the restaurant cameras to show her sitting with me at the exact time of the robbery. She wanted staff to confirm she came in and sat down calm and normal. She wanted me to unknowingly back her story if police checked. She used the date as a cover. And she picked me because I was new, someone she only spoke to online, someone who had no clue what she'd been doing that day. When they let her out of the restaurant, she kept looking back at me. Not scared. Not apologetic. Just to know that the plan didn't work. Like I had ruined something she carefully prepared. I sat there long after everything settled, long after customers whispered to each other, long after the chairs stopped shaking from the officers rushing in. It felt like my brain couldn't catch up with what had just happened. I went on a date with someone who didn't even want to talk to me. She just needed me to exist at a table so she could point and say she was there the whole time. And the worst part is she almost pulled it off. I don't know why I even agreed to meet him somewhere that quiet. Normally, I pick places where there's loads of people walking around, somewhere loud enough that nothing weird can happen. But he kept saying he didn't like crowds and that he preferred chill meetups. And because he messaged in this soft, friendly way that didn't sound fake, I actually believe him. He kept calling himself awkward, someone who gets stressed talking in busy places. I thought, fine, whatever, let me just meet him near the bus stop he suggested. It wasn't far from my area, and I thought loads of people walk by there anyway. At first, everything seemed normal. His photos were harmless. He didn't look like someone trying to be mysterious or cool. He had this casual look like someone you'd see in a library or walking home from school. Hoodie, straight hair, small smile, nothing dramatic. He messaged a lot, but never in a weird way. Just little updates. How his day was going, what he ate, random memes he read earlier. Stuff that made him seem normal. When I got to the spot, the evening wasn't even late yet. Street lights were already turning on, buses going past every few minutes. It felt safe enough. I told him I arrived, and he replied instantly saying he was 1 minute away. Literally exactly those words. 1 minute away. I waited, just scrolling and half looking around. A bus came, then left. Still no sign of him. I messaged again, just checking, and he replied the same thing. 1 minute away. This happened 3 times. And that's when something started to feel strange. Not scary, just strange. Like something wasn't matching up. If someone was nearby, they wouldn't keep saying the same exact line over and over. They'd say something else like stuck at the lights or walking over now. But he didn't. It was like he copied and pasted the same message every time. I started looking around properly, and that's when I noticed someone behind the bus stop across the street. Not sitting on the bench. Actually standing behind the glass panel, half hidden in the shadow. I couldn't see his full face, but I could see his hood, his jawline, and the way he kept peeking out slightly and then stepping back. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for the bus, but he never looked at the timetable. He never checked the road. He wasn't even facing the direction the buses came from. He was watching me. Only me. Something in my chest tightened, like my body realized something before I did. I messaged the guy again saying, "Let me know when you're close because I don't see anyone." And right as I sent it, I saw the person behind the bus stop lift their phone, like they were reading something at the exact same time I messaged. And then my phone buzzed, 1 minute away. That's when everything in me went cold. Not dramatic panic, just this slow, heavy awareness that the person watching me might actually be the same person texting me. I stepped back from where I was standing and walked closer toward a shop entrance where other people were walking by. I didn't run or make it obvious, but I moved away from that whole area in case he tried something. He didn't follow. He stayed exactly where he was, like he was waiting for me to come back to the original spot. My phone buzzed again. "I'm close, don't move." That message wasn't like the others. It wasn't soft anymore. It felt like command. That's when I stopped caring about being polite. I blocked the number on the spot and walked toward a row of shops that were still open, putting distance between me and the bus stop. I didn't go home right away. I went into a corner shop and pretended to buy something I didn't even want. I just wanted to be somewhere with lighting and cameras. After a few minutes, I walked toward the main road and headed home fast. My brain kept replaying his messages, his timing, and the way that person stood behind the stop like he had been waiting long before I even arrived. Later that night, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was the police. They asked if I had been waiting for someone near that bus stop and described the exact time I was there. I nearly dropped my phone hearing that. I told them everything. The officer explained calmly that someone in the area had reported a suspicious man hanging around earlier and that when they approached him, he took off running. They didn't catch him, but they searched the area and checked his description against local alerts. That's when everything got way more real. The officer told me the man I described was a registered stalker who had been using fake profiles to lure women to quieter meeting points. Nothing dramatic like movie stuff, but he would pretend to be someone gentle and harmless, then wait for them to stand alone in spots he picked. Sometimes he'd follow them. Sometimes he'd watch from a distance. And apparently he would contact several girls at once, trying to get someone to show up first. The officers asked me to send the messages in the profile screenshots. When I did, they replied that the identity he used matched other complaints. Same type of photos, same tone, same excuses about being close, but never actually showing up until the girl stood alone long enough. I sat in my room that night just staring at my wall, thinking about how easily I could have ignored that weird moment behind the bus stop. How easily I could have stayed standing there because I didn't want to look paranoid. He wasn't 1 minute away. He was already there. He had been there before I even arrived. I keep replaying the way he held up his phone, checking it at the exact moment I messaged him. The way he didn't follow when I moved, like he needed me to be in the exact spot he picked. And the messed up part is that he didn't say a single word out loud. Not one. He just watched. I still don't know why I agreed to a full dinner at someone's place for a first date. It wasn't something I normally did, and honestly, it wasn't even something I thought about properly. It just sounded calm, different, and she kept making it seem like it would be chill. She called herself quiet and homely, and kept saying she loved cooking because it made her feel relaxed. And with how stressed I had been that week, the idea of just sitting down for a cooked meal didn't sound bad at all. Her photos were clean, normal, nothing edited like crazy. The house in her background looked nice but not too fancy. Every picture she posted looked like someone who actually took time making their place look warm. Shelves with plants, soft lights, tidy areas. You know that style people try too hard to copy, but hers looked naturally put together. We messaged for a few days and everything felt steady. Not too much, not too little. She suggested I come over around 7 so we could eat before it got too late. She said she loved making pasta and garlic bread, and she promised it would be good. I thought, all right, cool, it's just dinner. Nothing more. The house didn't look strange when I arrived. It was one of those semi-detached places in a quiet neighborhood where everyone has the same style porch and the same trimmed hedges. There was a small welcome mat and a pot with flowers next to the door. Everything looked normal. She opened the door wearing a simple outfit, nothing fancy, and her hair tied back like she had been cooking for real. Inside, the place smelled clean, not like cleaning sprays, but like someone actually kept the place tidy. It had that soft, cozy vibe I'd seen in her photos. The lights were warm, the sofa looked fresh, and the dining table was already set with plates and candles. She told me to make myself comfortable while she grabbed a bottle of wine from the kitchen. She seemed a bit nervous, but I assumed that was just first date awkwardness. I sat at the table looking around, and I noticed something weird out of nowhere. The photos on the wall didn't match her. The family in the frames didn't look anything like her. Not even close. Different skin tone, different build, different everything. I stood up to look at one of the frames properly, thinking maybe they were old pictures of previous tenants or something. Everything about the house suddenly felt too perfect, too staged, like it was prepared quickly but looked lived in, except not by her. Before I could even think it through, I heard a noise outside. Not footsteps, more like fast movement on gravel. Then voices. Then loud bangs. Not knocks. Actual full-force hits against the door. The next second, the whole front door exploded inward with a crash that shook the floor. Police came flooding into the house, shouting, moving fast, pushing past furniture. One of them yelled for me to step away from the table with my hands visible. Another rushed toward the kitchen. At first, I honestly thought they came for me. I kept saying I didn't do anything, but my voice sounded too thin even to myself. Then I heard her scream from the kitchen. Not like someone scared of police. More like someone who had been caught doing something she already knew was wrong. They pulled her out into the hallway where I could see her properly. Her face was bright red, her hands shaking. She kept trying to explain something, but none of it made sense. The officers asked me who I was and why I was in the house. I told them she invited me for dinner. The officer closest to me looked confused for a second, then almost annoyed. He told me the house didn't belong to her. The owners had left for a holiday 3 days ago, and the neighbors had been watching the property because apparently someone had been messing with the back door earlier in the week. When they saw lights on and movement inside tonight, they called the police thinking it was a break-in. They asked me how long I had known her. I said not long at all. Then he gave me this look like he was trying to figure out if I was part of it. I told him I had literally just arrived for dinner 10 minutes ago. Another officer came out of the kitchen holding her bag. Inside were tools. Not huge ones, but enough to show she had forced her way into the house. There were also printed recipes, candles, a playlist written on a folded paper, and notes about how she wanted the day to go. Little things like when she should bring out dessert and when she should dim the lights. She wasn't planning a dinner. She was planning a performance. When they questioned her, she kept saying she just wanted everything to be perfect. She kept talking fast, rambling about how her own place wasn't nice enough and how she wanted to make a good first impression. She said she didn't mean harm, but the officers didn't listen to that part. They were too busy checking the house for damage. The more she talked, the more sense it didn't make. She said she only borrowed the house. Borrowed. Like breaking in was nothing. She said she wanted a place that matched the vibe she showed online because she didn't want to look boring. That she wanted to cook a proper meal in a proper kitchen so I wouldn't think she was messy. She said she planned the whole thing so I'd think she lived in a good neighborhood, that she had her life sorted, that she wasn't just someone in a cramped flat. That's when it hit me. All her photos inside a nice home, all the tidy spaces, all the cozy corners, they weren't hers. She had taken pictures inside this house before the owners left. She had probably been planning this longer than I even knew her. She must have seen the owners, watched when they left, checked when the neighbors weren't paying attention, and slipped inside. The thought made my stomach twist. They escorted her outside while I sat on the sofa because my legs felt like they weren't even attached to me. The officers kept asking me if I touched anything, if I moved anything, if I noticed anything strange. I kept telling them I barely had time to breathe before everything happened. When they finally let me go, one of the neighbors stood outside staring at me like I was part of the mess. I didn't even blame her. If I saw someone walking out of a broken-into house with police everywhere, I'd think the same. The whole walk home, I couldn't stop thinking about how close I came to eating dinner in a house that didn't belong to the person who invited me. How close I came to believing everything she staged. And the craziest part is that she looked completely normal online. Not dramatic, not wild, not suspicious. Just someone who wanted a quiet night. I don't know why I even agreed to meet him. It wasn't like I was desperate or bored out of my head. It was more that his messages were so different from what I usually get. Most guys either try too hard or try too little, but he was in the middle. Calm, slow replies, nothing pushy, nothing weird. He kept calling himself quiet and shy, almost like he was trying to warn me he wasn't that exciting. I actually liked that because I was tired of loud personalities pretending they cared. His pictures were simple. Nothing edited or filtered. Just these soft smiles, hoodie up, sitting near his desk, sometimes outside in what looked like a park. He seemed shy in the photos too, like someone who didn't want attention on him. He told me he didn't really go out and preferred small cafes. That made him sound harmless. So when he asked if I wanted to meet after college, I said yeah. I thought worst case, it's just awkward, and I go home. The cafe he picked was bright and busy enough that I wasn't worried. It was one of those places where you hear milk steamers going off every 2 minutes and people arguing over pastries. I walked in expecting to see the boy from the photo sitting by himself, looking nervous. But when I saw him, something felt wrong immediately. I couldn't explain it at first. He had the same hoodie, the same hair, kind of the same face, but it was like he'd taken the photos on a really lucky day because he didn't look exactly like them. He looked older, more tired, a bit withdrawn, but he still smiled when he saw me and waved me over. I told myself maybe he was just having a bad day. We sat down and talked a little. Well, I talked. He barely said anything beyond nodding or giving tiny responses. I didn't mind because I thought that's what shy people were like, but he didn't even look shy. He looked like he was watching everything around us instead of listening to me. He kept glancing behind me, at the counter, at the door, even at the street outside. I thought he was just awkward or scared to mess up. Then everything changed in seconds. A group of 3 women walked in, all around their late 20s or early 30s. At first, I didn't even think they were looking at me. They went past the door like normal customers. But then they stopped. All 3 of them stared directly at the guy I was sitting with. Not confused. Not surprised. Angry. One of them pointed at him, and I felt him freeze next to me. He didn't even turn around. He just went still like he already knew what was coming. The women walked straight over to our table. They didn't raise their voices or anything, but they didn't look away from him for even a second. One of them looked at me and asked really quietly if I was here with him. I said yeah, and then she leaned closer and told me he wasn't who he said he was. She said he had used the same identity with her friend months ago. The same photos, the same messages, the same shy act. She said he switches names every few weeks, changes tiny details, and repeats everything with new girls. I didn't even know how to react. My mind was racing trying to catch up. I looked at him expecting him to say something, but he didn't even open his mouth. He just stared at the floor like he had been caught stealing something. The women explained more. They said he convinced one of them to lend him money by pretending he had issues at home. When she refused to give more, he blocked her. They said another girl read online that he had a sister in hospital, which was a lie he used on multiple people. He would pretend to be this quiet guy who didn't have anyone, then asked for small amounts first, then more later. I wanted to get up from the table, but when I stood, one of the women told me not to leave yet because they had already called the police. They said another victim had seen him outside the cafe and recognized him from a wanted alert that had been posted earlier that week. That's when everything clicked. The glancing around, the stiff posture, the silence, he wasn't shy. He was checking if he was being watched. Within minutes, 2 officers walked into the cafe. The moment they stepped inside, his entire body tensed. They started scanning a room, and one of the women raised her hand slightly to show them where we were. The officers walked straight to our table without hesitation. They asked him to stand up. He didn't move. They repeated it, firmer this time, and he slowly pushed himself up from the chair like the ground was sinking beneath him. They asked him to confirm his name. The name he gave wasn't the one he used with me. It wasn't the one he used with a woman's friend either. It was a completely different name. They pulled out a printed sheet with a picture on it. It was him, but he looked rougher, more stressed, almost like the version sitting next to me. The officers said he had been wanted for multiple scams involving different women, and that some of them had reported stolen money, stolen items, and threats when they refused to help him anymore. He didn't argue. He didn't say anything to defend himself. He just kept whispering something I couldn't hear before he finally stopped talking altogether. He looked at me once, just once, before they cuffed him. His eyes didn't look scared or angry. They looked empty, like he'd given up months ago and this was just the last stop. One of the women apologized to me for getting involved, but honestly, I was glad they did. The officer asked me if I wanted to make a statement since I had met him through the app. I said yes because the way he acted suddenly made everything make sense. He was walking around pretending to be someone vulnerable so he could pick people who felt sorry for him. And I almost fell for it. When they let him out of the cafe, the whole place went silent. People moved their drinks aside just to make room for the officers walking him out. The women stayed with me until everything settled. They said they only came in because they couldn't let someone else fall for the same thing. I went home feeling like my brain was still stuck inside that cafe. Not scared, just weirded out at how fast something that looks normal can flip. One minute I was sitting across from someone who looked like a quiet boy with messy hair and a hoodie, and the next minute I was watching officers walk him out like he'd been running from this moment for months. And the worst part is, if those women hadn't walked in at the exact time they did, I would expect my whole day thinking he was just awkward. I wasn't even meant to be out that night. I was supposed to stay home and chill because I had college early the next morning, but I got bored and started scrolling through the app like everyone does when they're trying to distract themselves. That's when this girl popped up. Her pictures were crazy good. Not like influencer level, but clean, bright, and kind of different to what you usually see. She had that calm look, soft lighting, natural smile. It felt like someone who didn't try too hard, but still looked put together. We talked for a little bit. Nothing too deep. Just random stuff about food, random memes, all of that. She replied fast, which made it feel real. And she wasn't coming across weird either. Honestly, she seemed a bit too cool about everything. But I didn't think much of it. All I thought was, all right, she's chill, whatever, let's meet. She suggested walking around town instead of going somewhere loud. I actually liked that because it felt safe. Open area, lots of people, bright lights, nothing creepy tucked away. Plus, it was early evening and shops were still open, so everything felt pretty normal. But then she showed up. The second she walked toward me, I knew it wasn't her from the pictures. Not even close. Different body shape, different face, different vibe completely. The hair didn't match. The height didn't match. Literally nothing matched. It was like meeting a whole different person who just borrowed the smile from the profile. I tried not to make a big deal out of it at first. I just told myself maybe the pictures were old, or maybe they were taken at weird angles. But within seconds of walking with her, I realized the girl beside me wasn't even trying to pretend she looked like those photos. She didn't apologize, didn't explain, didn't even act embarrassed. She acted like I already knew and was cool with it. That part threw me off way more than the look difference. As we walked, she kept glancing around. Not like she was scared, but like she was checking who was around us. She held her hoodie tight and kept her head slightly down. I thought maybe she didn't want to be recognized by someone she knew. I didn't want to judge, so I kept walking, but something was building in my head like a slow alarm. We were going past the bus station when two officers turned the corner. Nothing unusual. They always walk around that area checking on people causing trouble. They weren't even looking at us first. But then both of them slowed down when they saw her. They didn't look at me. They only zoned in on her face. One of them stepped in front of us and asked her something in this firm but calm voice. She froze. I didn't understand why she froze that hard over something basic. The officer asked her again for ID. She didn't move. Didn't reach for her pocket. Didn't say anything. She just stood stiff like she was replaying every possible excuse in her head, and none of them were working. The other officer asked me who she was, and I told him I had only met her 5 minutes ago. The first officer asked her again for ID, and this time her hands looked shaky when she pulled out her wallet. But she didn't hand anything over. She just held it half open, like she was thinking whether it was even worth trying. The officer gently took it and looked at the card. It didn't match her face. He asked her for her real details. She just kept staring forward like she couldn't even form words. The second officer stepped behind her slightly, not grabbing her or anything, just ready in case she ran. I remember standing there, confused as anything, feeling stupid for not understanding what was going on yet. The officer then asked me if I had seen her photos online before meeting her. I said, yeah, of course. That's how we matched. He nodded like he expected that answer. Then he told me quietly that the photos she used belonged to a missing girl. A real girl reported missing a few months ago, and her pictures had been stolen from her old social media. My chest just dropped. Not in some dramatic movie way. Just this heavy, slow realization that the person I was walking with wasn't just someone who edited their pictures or lied about angles. She had built her whole profile off someone who wasn't even around anymore. They asked her again to confirm her identity, and she still didn't give anything. She kept shaking her head like she was refusing everything at once. The whole moment felt unreal. People were walking past us. Buses were pulling in. Everything around us was normal except for the fact I was standing next to someone who wasn't supposed to exist online in the way she presented herself. Eventually, the officers took her aside and told me to step back but not go anywhere. They asked me what app I used, how long we had talked, whether she sent voice notes, anything. She never had. Only texts. Now it made sense. After a few minutes of talking to her, they confirmed the ID she gave wasn't real. It belonged to someone else. The name didn't match the pictures she used online. Nothing lined up. She wasn't arrested on the spot or anything, but they did lead her toward the patrol car because they needed to take her somewhere to figure out who she actually was. When they walked her away, she didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. She just kept her head low like she already knew it was over. I stood there for a second, not really sure what to do. The officer came back and explained a bit more, saying that her photos matched a case they'd been monitoring for weeks. Every time someone reported a fake profile using those pictures, the police logged it because they didn't know if it was connected to the missing person or someone pretending to be her. So when the officers recognized the face from the pictures, they reacted instantly. Not because of me, but because they didn't know if she had any link to the missing girl. I went home that night in complete silence. Not even angry, just blank. I kept thinking about how many people she might have spoken to using those stolen pictures. How many people thought they were meeting someone who didn't even match a single detail of the real profile. And the weirdest part is she wasn't even trying to cover it up. She walked around like she was invisible. The whole thing still messes with my head because I keep thinking about the real girl, the one in the photos, where she actually was, and why someone else was out there using her face like a mask. I didn't even plan on going out that day. It was one of those evenings where you're scrolling while lying on your bed, bored out of your mind, replying to people you don't even really care about. That's how this guy showed up. His photos were clean, sharp, and honestly way too perfect. Not like model level perfect, but the type of perfect where you can tell every picture has that smoothed out glow and weird blur around the jawline. I should have clocked that. But he was friendly quick to reply, and didn't talk like someone trying too hard. It felt normal enough for me to say, yeah, fine, I'll meet him. I wasn't expecting anything special. I just wanted something to do. He said his flat was close to a small shopping strip I knew, which made it seem even safer. Busy area, lots of people around, nothing sketchy. The only annoying thing was how he kept asking which time I'd get there, like down to the minute. I didn't think much of it. I thought he was just nervous or something. The whole walk there, something felt off. I don't mean in some dramatic way. It just felt like when you're going somewhere and the vibe doesn't match the idea in your head. His messages were cool, calm, relaxed, but the actual building he lived in looked tired. Not dirty or anything, just old. Not what I expected based on how clean he tried to look online. I turned the corner and saw flashing lights. At first, I didn't even think it had anything to do with him. The police cars were parked outside the block, and people were standing around whispering. I remember thinking, great, this is all I need. Probably some random argument or someone's fire alarm going off again. You know how people get. When I checked the building number and realized it was his, my stomach just sank. I still went closer because I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Plus, I didn't want to look weird turning around while people were staring. The entrance door was open and 2 police officers were standing by it, talking quietly. I told them who I was meant to be meeting, and the way the female officer looked at me made me feel stupid. Not in a rude way, just that look someone gives you when you've walked straight into something without realizing. She told me calmly that I was in trouble, but I shouldn't go inside. I could hear voices upstairs. Heavy boots, muffled talking, someone dragging something across the floor. A neighbor on the ground floor leaned out her doorway and said that the guy in the flat had weird people coming over all the time. She said he would buzz in different girls every night, sometimes within minutes of each other, and stay up till dawn. I didn't even know how to respond. I just stood there, listening like someone watching their own life flinch. Then another officer came down carrying a box. Inside it were phones. So many phones piled on top of each other. All different types, some cracked, some really new. The officer holding it didn't say anything to me, but the way he avoided eye contact was enough to tell me that whatever was upstairs wasn't normal. They asked me if I had ever been to his flat before. I told them no. They asked how long I'd been speaking to him. I told them only a couple of days. They asked me if he ever pushed know exactly what time I'd arrive. That question hit me like a punch. I said, yeah, he did. Over and over. The female officer explained it gently, but it still felt unreal. The guy had been lining up multiple dates in a single night. Not just talking to girls, but actually organizing them to show up around the same time. And he wasn't doing it because he was some kind of player or whatever. He had hidden cameras set up around his flat. Not tiny spy thriller ones either. Actual sneaky little devices planted behind decorations, vents, wardrobe cracks. Recording everything the moment someone walked in. Apparently neighbors complained because they kept seeing different girls leaving the flat looking uncomfortable. Some of them red-faced, some walking quickly like they just wanted to disappear. And last night, someone heard crying in the hallway, and that was the last straw for them. They called the police today when they saw him bring in another girl, and then buzz in two more right after. While the officers were explaining everything, the guy I came to meet was handcuffed and brought down the stairs. He didn't look anything like his filtered photos. His skin looked blotchy, his eyes were darker, and his whole vibe just felt cold. He didn't look at me, but he definitely knew who I was supposed to be. One of the officers asked me if I was okay. I said yeah, even though my heart was going mad. They told me I could go home and that they might contact me if they needed a statement. I walked out of that building trying not to look back, but everyone outside was staring, waiting to see who would walk out next. I didn't even make it halfway down the street before I stopped. It hit me properly then. If I had arrived even 10 minutes earlier, I would have been upstairs in that room, probably sitting on whatever sofa he used to film people. Maybe he would have lined someone up right after me, and I would have heard footsteps outside the door thinking it was nothing. I kept imagining myself on one of those cameras, not even realizing I was being watched. What I can't get out of my head is how normal he seemed in messages. Nothing creepy, nothing intense, just average. I keep thinking about how many people walk into places assuming it's fine because the person seems fine online. I didn't even check him properly. I just assumed those photos were real. I still have him blocked, even though he's obviously not using that account anymore. It just makes me sick when I think about how many girls he probably tricked the same way. And the scariest part is that if those neighbors hadn't spoken up, he would have kept going. More nights, more girls, more hidden cameras lined up like some twisted playlist. That whole walk home, I couldn't even focus on the road. All I was thinking was how close I came to being another one of his recordings.